Monica, welcome to the Personal Best podcast.
Hi, Ruby. Thanks so much for having me.
It's so nice to have you here. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I know you are a relationship coach and a bit of an expert when it comes to men and women in relationships. And it's personally a topic that I love talking about with my girlfriends and whoever. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into all of that today. But I wanted to start by asking you why you decided to become a relationship coach in the first place.
Yeah, well, whenever people ask me this question, I always want to come up with a more glamorous answer. But to be honest with you, it's one of those cases where I very much turned my pain into my purpose. And it was definitely something which I struggled with the most in life, love, relationships, dating, and especially self-love as well. And so for me, what happened was that I basically went on a very deep healing journey around all of that kind of stuff. And I realized actually how ill-informed and ill-educated we all are about all of these kind of topics. And so I, yeah, basically dove into learning everything that I could about relationships and dating, and then ended up doing some studies around it as well. And so I've basically made it my kind of passion in life to help people form healthy relationships with others, but also probably most importantly with themselves.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think part of that is that we're never properly given the education of what healthy relationships and I guess having love for yourself actually looks like. And a lot of
Yeah.
our education comes from what we see in our childhood. And,
Mm,
if you've never been shown what a healthy relationship looks like, then how are you meant to know that? So I think
exactly.
it is definitely something that a lot of people will kind of have difficulty with in their own lives. But for you, I guess, like, what did that look like? Did you struggle to kind of find self love, and did that play out in relationships?
100%. I think the you have to have a healthy relationship with yourself before you can have a healthy relationship with somebody else. And that doesn't mean you have to be 100% entirely healed before you can get into a relationship. But I do think you need to have a certain level of self-love to be able to attract that healthy love into your life. Because otherwise you'll keep repeating the same destructive relationship patterns over and over again. And yeah, I mean that's what I saw within my life, and so I went on a deep journey of self-love. Really was the main thing. And that didn't always look pretty. That people I think of self-love as maybe more sort of self-care of
Mm.
the bubble baths and the
Mm.
spa days and all of that kind of stuff, and that's a beautiful act of love to yourself, but you can still do those things and not love yourself. And so doing the work to work on basically radically unconditionally accepting all parts of yourself, I think is really key when it comes to self-love. And that often means that when you're going through painful times, for instance, not trying to just fix the issue and being with yourself, or rather than criticizing yourself or hating on certain parts of yourself, accepting those parts of yourself, even
Yeah.
the parts that everyone else has told you growing up or from society that they make you less lovable, and accepting all of those parts of yourself. And for me that's also the only way to truly heal parts of yourself that you maybe are being a bit destructive for you, is to accept them first. And this might sound a bit strange, but kind of hear what they have to say as well.
Mm.
And doing that sort of inner inquiry work of like inner dialogue basically with these different parts of you, to then work out like why are they truly here, what's their purpose for being here. And there truly is always a loving reason why every single part of you is part of you. It was maybe from when you were a young child, that part of you felt like it needed to protect you by behaving in this certain way or adopting that belief. But in reality it's coming from a loving place. And so when you can form that type of relationship with every part of yourself, you can then truly love all parts of yourself.
Yeah, I really love that advice and how I guess self-acceptance and self-love isn't just about noticing your good qualities, but also maybe some things that you still struggle with or I don't want to call them flaws, but
Mm,
those imperfections that we
yes.
all have. So I think it is super important. But do you think people need to do that work and go on that journey of self-love by being single? Or is it something that you can still work on when you're in a relationship? Because it's something that I've
Mm,
really noticed is when I've been single, a lot of people say to me, you just need to work on yourself. You shouldn't go on dates. You shouldn't be looking for anybody. You need to put all the focus onto you, which I think is really valid advice. But I also know a lot of people who are in romantic relationships who also still have issues. Maybe they do have low self esteem. Maybe they have attachment issues. Maybe they're very codependent. So
mm.
I don't think it's like single people need to do all the work and then people in relationships have got it all figured out.
Yes, I totally agree. Um, I think the beauty of relationships is the growth that can come out of them.
Yeah.
Um, And so, if you have the self awareness to be able to learn from conflict, for instance, rather than just allowing it to kind of spiral, then relationships can be the most beautiful experience for you to evolve as a person and for you to grow and become a better version of yourself. And that can also mean developing deeper self love for yourself. I guess the with the work that I do, I guess the focus is more that if you are single, rather than looking outside of you for the answers, looking within, because it's very easy, especially when you're single, to kind of feel like you're this victim of circumstance, that it's not your fault and that it's just because, well, the popular narrative among some women is, oh, all men are like, or there's no good men out there, and I'm sure among men as well, oh, there's no good women out there. And that is very disempowering, to basically put yourself in that victim position, rather than taking back your power and looking at your internal world and seeing what you can change within your internal world. So when I say about healthy relationships, it's not to say that you can't get into a relationship, but it's just to say that the more work that you do on yourself as a single person before getting into a relationship, then you will attract somebody at that same level as you, in terms of, because we essentially attract somebody who's at the same level of wounding as us. Basically, it doesn't need to be
Mm.
the exact same wounding, but your level of like deep self-love or insecurities or things like that, you'll often attract someone into your life that in a different form has that same level of wounding. And so the more that you can heal yourself, whether in relationship or out of a relationship, then the healthier the relationship that you will then have with other people, and including romantic partnerships as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've heard it be explained before that if you're actively looking to find somebody in order to kind of fill that void within yourself, it's not a
Yeah.
very healthy starting point for a relationship. And I'm in a very good relationship right now. And actually, both me and my boyfriend hadn't been actively dating really, or like looking for anybody for
Mm.
quite a few months before we both met. And that was intentional. I think both of us were in a position where we wanted to focus a bit more on ourselves and our
Mm.
career. And then when we did meet, it was like we were both, as you said, we were kind of meeting each other at the same level, and
Yeah.
and maybe we were both quite secure. And I think that was a great starting point
Hmm.
compared to other relationships that I've had in the past. But in terms of when people are looking for a partner, I wanted to ask you, what patterns do you see in women, but I guess you could also say men, who keep attracting the wrong partner, if we're going to put it
Mm.
that way, or emotionally unavailable partners?
Yes. Yeah, great question. So, well, I'd say two big factors play a role in this. So, one of them we've kind of already addressed a little bit, about self love and self worth. But also, your childhood conditioning plays a huge role in all of this. So, there's a few different theories around this, but so one of them is essentially that it's this almost concept of like redemption, basically, that your subconscious, if you experienced any wounding from your childhood, from your primary caregivers, then you will subconsciously seek a partner who replicates similar sort of behaviors or characteristics as the primary caregiver that caused you the most harm, so that you will then repeat the cycle, and
Mm.
then finally the ending, you can make the ending different, and then finally you will sort of redeem yourself, and then this wounded part of you, which I would describe as kind of the inner child, will finally feel lovable because the story has ended differently this time, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
um Also, our nervous system seeks familiarity.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you'll go for somebody if you lived in an environment when you were younger where it was very chaotic, or unsafe or abusive even, then that will be more safe for you in adulthood, and your nervous system will be more drawn, and it will feel safer being in a partnership with somebody who is actually quite unsafe, because that's
Yeah.
what's familiar to you. And then also, what we can do is we can, from our childhood, we form associations of what love is. So, how you're shown love to be based on how you're given love, how you receive love, and how you also see your primary caregivers showing love to each other, that all teaches you what love is. And so, if you're taught that love is abusive or things like that, then you might end up getting into relationships and thinking it's acceptable certain behaviors because you've associated that with love. Or, with people with anxious attachment, for instance, it can be to do with the fact that that type of chaotic up and down version of love is how they've associated love to be. So again, their nervous system feels more comfortable in that kind of environment than
Yeah.
actually a secure, stable environment.
So interesting. And it makes so much sense as to why people aren't necessarily choosing partners that are bad for them, but
Mm,
they're choosing familiarity, as you've explained. And I guess that pattern can follow from relationship to relationship. And you can't really break that cycle unless you are shown, I guess, a different form of love.
mm,
Um, and I do think it's quite sad when people end up in, I guess, what we'd call toxic or like damaging
mm,
relationships. Um, and they can't almost see that until someone comes and takes the like rose tinted glasses off, and they kind of see it for themselves. But
mm.
another point that relates to what you were saying before about people often protesting that there's no good men out there or no good women out there is, are we sometimes looking for the wrong traits in partners that we would want to be with romantically?
100%. Yes. I think what's very much celebrated in society is, I guess the more superficial traits. And
Mm.
we were just talking before the podcast about like a high value man and or high value woman, and so much of the time it's to do with looks or money in your bank account, job title, those kind of things. But those things don't equate to someone who's going to be a great long-term partner for you, or any kind of compatibility. And so but also in terms of qualities that could make long-term partnership, there may be the type of qualities that they're maybe not, the sexiest, like integrity and healthy communication and emotional intelligence. Those kind of things will actually create a much more long-lasting, healthy relationship. A six pack or things like that is not going to make a long lasting relationship. It might create some level of attraction and chemistry, and chemistry is really important. But if you allow those more like superficial traits to override the qualities that actually will be able to create safe, long lasting love, then yeah, you'll keep repeating the same destructive relational patterns, or keep getting yourself into these situations with people who just aren't right for you.
Mhm. Yeah, I think at a societal level, there definitely is a expectation of I guess what women want or what men
Mm,
want. But then also at a personal level, sometimes people might think they want certain things, and then when they enter that relationship, actually it doesn't serve them. If
yes.
maybe you think you do want the gym guy with the six pack who
Mhm.
um drives a fancy car and has the money, but actually, as you said, he's a poor communicator or he doesn't know how to show affection, and actually those things really matter to you. It's not going to be the like healthy loving relationship that you're maybe looking for. I
Mm,
guess if you, for example, are on a dating app and you can kind of filter the things that you're looking for,
mm.
what should people actually be filtering for
I
rather
think
than the height and the money and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a really good question because honestly, I understand, especially with my line of work, I need to, I know how to help people like optimize their profile
Mm,
and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I do think that's actually a problem of the apps is that it has created this idea that people should, um, yeah, prioritize things like height. And obviously, you're looking at someone like it's a
mm.
catalog of, of
I guess if you could, what I mean is like if you had the filters of, say, like integrity and things like that,
mm,
what should people be turning on versus maybe some of the more like superficial things that we actually see?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say if you could turn on, are they able to communicate healthily with you? Do they have emotional intelligence? Do they have self-awareness as well? Are they willing and also ready for a long-term commitment? I know they do
Mm,
actually have that on there, so maybe that's one of the things that's
yeah.
quite good. Um, but yeah, I'd say those more like grounded qualities of just yeah, trustworthiness and um consistency as well, I think is a really positive trait to look out for in those early stages of dating.
Mm.
Um respect, those sorts of things. If we could put that as a check mark, then those would be the qualities that I think people should
Yeah.
be prioritizing. But, it's that's why I say to my clients that you shouldn't necessarily always go for your type because your type will probably be, you know, tall, dark, and handsome or something along
Mhm.
those lines. There's that TikTok meme, isn't there, that's like looking for a man in five
Finance,
six
yeah.
five. And it's like I feel like so many women are looking for somebody with that is their type, is something like that. But actually those men aren't necessarily going to make you feel safe in the relationship, and that needs to be a number one priority. And I don't just mean in terms of physical safety, but I mean, emotional safety as well.
Yeah.
So that's really key.
I think it is really interesting. And also, something I've learned is that compatibility doesn't just come from having similar hobbies or interests. I think for a while I was like, well, if a guy's into the gym, then we'll be a perfect match. But
Yeah.
actually, there's so much other stuff that you need to consider. And I think in a relationship, anyway, it's nice when you can bring your differences into that
100%.
and
Yeah.
learn from each other. And my boyfriend now is really into the outdoors and hiking. And we've
Mm,
done loads of that together, which I just wouldn't have done really before meeting him. And so it's nice when you can kind of, yeah, involve each other in your own worlds. But sticking kind of on the topic of dating apps a little bit, from your bird's eye view, what do you think of like the modern dating market right now?
yeah, well, I know I'm going to sound a bit biased because I do coaching in this area, but I do feel like if people don't kind of do the inner work and educate themselves as well about, as we just said, what it really means, what healthy partnership really looks like and
Mm,
what to be looking out for and things like that, then I honestly I do think it's quite a difficult time to be dating just because I mean, firstly, the sort of if you don't choose to educate yourself around this topic in the way that you choose, you will be indoctrinated with different things that you're being shown through, and I'm not hating on Love Island. Well, I I get that it's an amazing entertaining show, but a show like Love Island, for instance, it's
yes.
demonstrating such toxicity in terms of relationships.
Yes.
And maybe not for the older generations, but I do worry about the younger generations. What they will be thinking is, you know, normal or acceptable in terms of in relationships because we do become slightly indoctrinated from the things that we're constantly watching. So I think that's maybe causing a bit of an issue in terms of how people date these days, but also technology, how, we're so used to instant gratification these days with, Uber Eats, Amazon Prime, next day delivery, everything we can just get straight away.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of putting in the effort in a relationship or anything like that, people get the ick over the tiniest thing, and people aren't willing to put in the effort to actually see, okay, let's just put in a bit more time to see if this could become something, or the first sign of conflict, they're out of the relationship. And actually, there's so much beauty that can come from conflict in a relationship. We don't need to just exit the situation straight away.
Hmm.
Um, And yeah, I think dating apps as well has caused a bit of an issue in terms of like the paradox of choice as well. How, we're not really satisfied because we have so many options. And then also, we don't really have to develop ourselves or get better as humans because we can just, go on the apps and just find another 20 people, or no, way more than that, thousands of people to then date. And so I think, yeah, all of those, and then that's creating as well this very disposable nature to humans,
Mm.
basically, that, if you can date somebody and then if they, they don't want to continue dating you, whatever, that's fine because you can just go on a million other dates, or there's one minor thing that pops up and it's fine, you can just go on to the next one. And actually I think there's beauty in needing to like to to almost work for something, maybe doesn't isn't the right way of phrasing it, but just being able to develop yourself in an area. And I don't feel like by just having people as disposable beings that, okay, I can just move on to the next one, I
Mm.
don't think that's really helping with that either. So anyway, yeah, I think it's a bit of a minefield for people at the moment, and I think a lot of people are feeling very exhausted by it. But the good thing is that because I think people are feeling very exhausted by it, people are looking for other options, and
Mm.
so people are wanting to meet people in real life a lot more. And yeah, people are more open to that sort of thing. I think obviously COVID, I think, created um, a bit of an issue for people in terms of, people spent so much time staring at a screen that people got a bit more used to staring. And even today, like, they're way more used to staring at a screen than into people's eyes. And so people are lacking connection, I think, a lot. And so people are really wanting relationships, but I think trying to find it through a screen or in the ways that they're sort of doing it at the moment maybe aren't serving them as well as they maybe thought.
Yeah. Do you think for the younger generation, people in their 20s now, they are afraid of commitment? I feel like a lot of people end up in situationships, and maybe that's
Mm,
kind of a trickle down from things like Love Island, where
yeah.
people make a big deal out of being exclusive, but are scared for that commitment.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think this ties into a little bit of like the paradox of choice, that people
Mm.
always feel like the grass is greener on the other side. And again, that instant gratification of, you know, people aren't willing to put in the effort to make a relationship work because it's so much easier to they can just go on the apps and find, thousands of other people that they could date. So it's much easier for them to go down that route rather than putting in the effort. And I think that's almost been celebrated a little bit in society as well, of this idea of like this the validation that you can get from
Mm.
sleeping with loads of people or stuff like that. And I actually I think that's not a healthy way to view these things. That doesn't make you more lovable just because you've been able to sleep with loads of people, I think. And I think in terms of growth as well, um, putting in the effort to make a relationship work, there's so much growth that comes out of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, it's so much easier to just then be able to just go date somebody else,
Yeah.
rather than putting in that effort. So yeah, I like to think that hopefully the older the younger generation get, the more they'll start to value the things that come from a more long-term partnership as opposed to just these situationships that kind of lack like substance.
Yeah. Also, I think with the dating app thing, talking about kind of working on yourself, now when people go through a breakup, they can be on a dating app the next day. And they might not have healed those wounds and they
Yeah,
might not have processed any of what's happened. And yet they're looking for a one night stand, or they're looking
mhm.
for a rebound, or a new relationship. And actually, I
Yeah,
think those periods in between of just allowing yourself to heal and to be by yourself are really important.
100%, definitely. Yeah.
There's a few things that I want to like branch off to talk about. You mentioned there about how conflict resolution is really important in relationships, and maybe we're a bit scared of that. I know for my fellow people pleasers that it can feel quite uncomfortable when something like
Yeah.
that comes up in a relationship. What would your advice be to navigate conflict? without it ending in a breakup or losing connection with somebody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first point to address, I think, is that conflict, when done well, it actually can deepen the intimacy with somebody. So it doesn't need to be viewed as something which is going to create distance between two people. It actually will deepen intimacy if you know how to
Mm.
communicate in a healthy way. But so one of the things that I say is that, if you're in the midst of conflict, firstly, take a moment to pause. And I know that might sound really simple, but whether that's, just a moment taking a breath, or if it's that you need to say to your partner, I need to just take a little break so I can just process things and we'll come back to this conversation in a bit. Because the truth is that so much of the time when somebody triggers you, it's actually not what's happening in the present moment that's the issue. It's your past trauma that's
Yeah.
coming out to the surface. So it's basically your inner child that when you react in that moment, it's your inner child really that's reacting. It's not your adult self. So that's why I say to take a pause, because when you're able to take a pause, and whether that's just in the moment or whether you can then go and self regulate and self soothe, and really work out what this inner child actually needs right now. Because if the inner child is articulating it in that moment, then the inner child doesn't actually know what you need. It's coming from a very immature place, and it's almost, you can imagine it like it's throwing a temper tantrum basically within you, and so it's just screaming about anything. But when you can really, again, do that inner dialogue process with yourself and really work out what you actually need, that's when you can actually have your needs met, because you've worked out what your true need is in that moment, not what the sort of like
Yeah.
reaction is. And then as the adult self, you can then articulate that to the other person as well, rather than, again, both of you basically having two inner children that are speaking to each other rather than the
Mhm.
adult self speaking to each other. Um, but I also think, listening to learn rather than listening to respond in a conflict is really important. I think so much of the time we're not truly listening to what the other person is saying. Um, Also, I think recognizing that in in conflict in partnership, you don't want to win. You don't want either individual to win. You want the relationship to win. You kind of need to imagine it like this, like, third organism of, like, that you want that to win rather than each individual person, because if one of you win, then both of you have actually lost, whereas if the relationship wins, then you've both won. um and I also think in heterosexual relationships especially, understanding each other's differences is a really is a good way to be able to basically have compassion for the other person's perspective, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of conflict can arise because women or men don't understand that we are actually wired differently. Men and women are different in some ways. And there was this really interesting study actually, which was done by the Gottman Institute, which is like one of the, um, the couple that runs it. They're basically the most renowned, some of the most renowned relationship therapists, and they did this study on couples during conflict, and they would basically study what would go on within these heterosexual couples within their bodies,
Mm.
and it was over a prolonged period of time with loads of different couples. And what the studies basically showed was that even though men may come across calmer during conflict, or maybe less connected to the situation in conflict, what's going on in their internal environment is they have actually had a stronger reaction to what's happening. Their heartbeat is faster, their blood pressure is higher, and it also takes them longer to recover from the conflict as well, based on their internal environment. So I think that is just one of many examples that women can kind of, when they think, oh, why are you just storming off, or things like that, it's because their internal environment, it's really difficult for them right now to be able to handle this. And so and then bring into the mix as well, women, we might take for granted the fact that we've grown up where it has been deemed more acceptable for us to have, emotional conversations with people and get emotional and stuff. Men haven't had that. So if we can have compassion for the fact that if your partner isn't as emotionally available as you are, it's okay. He's grown up in a different way than you have, and
Mm.
just having compassion for that, to be able to be like, okay, let's both evolve and grow together, and part of that for you is to become more emotionally available, but he needs to recognize that it's safe for him to be emotional, because he might have grown up being told that crying is a weakness, or
Yeah.
talking about emotions is, so unlovable about him. And so yeah, I think understanding each other's differences is a really great way to be able to resolve conflict with just greater compassion for each other, basically.
Yeah, it's such good advice. And a lot of what you've said is very similar to um, the advice I heard from a communication expert that I spoke with in the podcast
Mm.
recently. And sort of what she was saying is that when you are having these conversations, don't put the blame on the other person, for one, but also have in mind what the outcome of that conversation is. So rather than just
Mm.
ranting and shouting and being, you did this, you did that, actually, yeah, approach it more calmly and try and have that constructive conversation. I guess the outcome is, like you said, that the relationship wins and you manage to resolve that issue and that you both come out the other side stronger. I think it is super important. But I think the difference between men and women is also fascinating. One of my friends went through a breakup recently, and there were a few issues kind of bubbling under the surface. And when her boyfriend had this conversation with her, he literally couldn't get the words out of, like, I don't want to be with you anymore. And it was a whole mess, and he was hysterical. And I feel sorry for him in that moment, even though he was the one that was ending the relationship, because clearly
Mm.
there were so many suppressed emotions, and also
Yeah.
probably hadn't spoken to his friends about any issues in the relationship or
Yeah.
even his parents. And so when it came to having that conversation, like, he was incapable of doing that. And yeah, I guess for women, a lot of the time we do have those closer, more intimate relationships with
Yeah.
our friends and females in our life. So yeah, the difference there, I think, is super interesting. But
Mm.
I guess when it comes to relationships and when things do end and people go through heartbreak, do you have any advice on, I guess, how you can move through that, um and I guess, like, deal with that grief?
Yeah, yeah, because it is grief. You are mourning the death of a person from your life.
Hmm.
It might not be they might not be going to wherever you think people go when they pass away, but you're mourning that person's presence in your life. You're mourning the vision that you had for your future together. You're mourning those hopes and dreams. So it's just really having compassion for yourself in those moments, because it's if there's anyone listening who's made it through a breakup, they'll know it's one of the hardest things that you will probably ever have to go through. um but yeah, I'd say I have a few phases that I suggest that people kind of
Mm,
go through with it, because you can't go straight to the end of this phase, these steps that I'm going to take you through. You have to take it in stages. So the first step I say is to kind of detox yourself from their life. So you know, that means so often like blocking them on social media, like not staying in contact with them, not looking at their photos all the time. Honestly, I put that as the first step, because you
yeah.
can follow the rest of the steps if you keep in contact with them, but you're just prolonging the process
Mm.
so much more. Something that could take you, you know, a few months will potentially take you a few years if you try and keep in contact with them.
I
So,
found out, sorry, I found out recently that in your camera roll, you can select a picture of someone and get it to show less. Because I don't know
really?
why, but
Wow.
when I've, like, broken up or had relationships and before, my camera roll loves to give me memories of
Always.
just that person, and then it makes those, like, photo montages to
Yes.
music of happy memories. And I'm like, no, don't do this to me. So you
It
can
was like that.
actually
Oh,
basically get it to
interesting.
like stop showing you those photos.
Wow.
Top
Okay,
tip.
that's a really good tip, actually. I have to tell one of my friends that actually. She was complaining about that the other day. Um, okay, so that would be the first
Yeah.
stage. Then I would say surrounding yourself with love and peace, because those are two resources that you're so vulnerable at that stage. You might not be able to access that feeling of self-love, and your nervous system will also probably be in slightly survival mode. So just trying to surround yourself with as much peace and love as possible. So surround yourself with friends and family that love you dearly, and spending time in nature, meditating, all of that kind of stuff. um, then when you feel strong, then it's time to process it and feel the pain basically and be with the pain.
Mhm.
And not try to fix it, not try to get rid of it, but just allow the processing of the pain. And then when you feel ready, then you can look at the situation and see what lessons you can learn from it. And again, that's not to place blame on yourself, but that's just to look at what can I learn from the situation, how things ended, how I was in the relationship, those sorts of things. Um, and then you can, yeah, then I would say that then you can start the kind of coming home to yourself process where you reconnect to the parts of yourself that maybe you felt disconnected from when you were in the relationship. And then there's the leveling up process. So for me, with my clients, I don't just want them to be able to survive from a breakup. I want them to actually thrive from it.
Mm.
And so I want them to use this opportunity as a way for them to basically upgrade in all areas of their life, and not because their ex broke up with them because of this reason, just because for them,
Yeah.
and as a deep act of self-love for themselves. And then the final stage is, if you do that stage right, then you can actually feel gratitude for the process, which is the hardest part of the process, because especially if your ex was abusive or something like that, then it doesn't feel very easy to look at the situation with gratitude. But in my opinion, there's always something beautiful you can learn from any experience,
Mhm.
and that's how you really make peace with a situation. Is when you can understand the lesson that you needed from that situation, and you can feel grateful for that.
I really like that advice. And my friend that went through the breakup recently, actually, I think she knew it was the right decision for it to end, but she said the
Mm.
hardest part was that you kind of mourn the future that you were planning to have with that
Yeah.
person. And I think it's really hard to come to terms with the fact that there isn't a different future or a paradigm where that relationship exists. Like,
Mm.
this is the reality. And I think it can be hard to come to terms with, especially when you have deep feelings for that person or you were with
Yeah.
them for a long time. Um, but I think by following those steps, as you've outlined, hopefully people can arrive at a position where they're grateful that it happened in a way, because it's
Mm.
allowed them to kind of move forward and probably taught them different lessons. A question I probably should have asked before this is also, how do you know when is the time to end a relationship? And I'm
Mm.
probably asking this from personal experience, because I've definitely stayed in relationships that weren't healthy, or just we weren't right for each other. But
Mm.
actually, the process of ending it felt really, really difficult.
Mm. Yeah. I think it's to do with, you know, consistent well-being and consistent disrespect, or consist how you feel within your body as well. You know, our body has so many answers for us, and so in your head you might be thinking, no, I should stay in this relationship because of XYZ reason. But if your body is, you know, constantly feeling a little bit anxious around this person, or constantly feeling a bit depleted around this person, tune into your
Mm.
body and ask your body the questions of, okay, why am I feeling like this? And if the answer is because you're around, you know, a person who isn't right for you, then yeah, that's probably a time to walk away from the relationship. um yeah, so it's kind of about the consistent lack of well-being, consistent disrespect, a lack of feeling of safety in that relationship. I mean, obviously, you know, if we're looking at abuse or things like that, obviously
Hmm.
that's a more obvious time to walk away.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, those would be
Yeah.
some.
I think a lot of people fall into this like sunk cost fallacy in relationships as well.
Mm,
It's like, well, we've been together 3 years, so we're committed now. We have to stay together. And especially when you creep into your late 20s, early 30s, it does feel like there's this time pressure, particularly
mm,
for women. We have like a biological clock. So you kind of do this like map in your head of, I'm going to get engaged and married, then have kids.
yeah.
But actually, just because you've been with someone for 3 years isn't a reason why you should stay in that relationship if it's not serving
Yes.
you.
And I think it's Matthew Hussey that has this quote where he says, um, you you'll find the right person for you by walking away from. Wait, I can't remember the exact quote actually, but it's something to do with basically the sooner you walk away from the wrong person, the sooner you will find
Yes.
the right person for you. And I think that's a way to, because I do, and that's where how we're conditioned is to kind of be thinking like that. But actually, if you can reframe that to, but actually, I will be closer to
Mm.
meeting the right person for me if I walk away from this relationship, which I know isn't serving me. I think that's quite a nice reframe of that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that I've learned is actually staying in the wrong relationship. You think maybe you're doing the right thing because you don't want to hurt the other person, but
Mm,
you're actually lying to yourself and you're lying to them about how you feel, which
100%.
arguably is worse because
Definitely.
for you, I guess if you're the one that's uncertain about the relationship, maybe you just feel a bit irritated by them or you're not as happy as you could be. But for them, they're like lured into this false sense of security and love that this
Yes.
relationship's great. And
Yeah.
and actually that's kind of worse in a
Def-
way.
and also, they they will be able to find someone better suited for them because they will be able to
Hmm.
find someone who actually thinks that they're amazing.
Yeah.
And so you're doing a disservice to both of you by staying in that relationship because you're abandoning yourself in the process, by staying in something that you don't want to be in. But also that you're actually stinting that person from being able to find someone who is right for them as well.
Yeah. That's a really nice way of looking at it, actually. And maybe it's a bit egotistical to think if I break up with them, they'll never find anyone else ever again. But like they probably will. And as you say, they'll probably find the right person for them,
Yeah.
which is so nice.
Mm.
There's one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because I think it's really interesting, which is this idea of if he wanted to, he would. And we'll stick with
Mm.
the men for now, because that's kind of where it gets thrown at most. But I've heard you say that if you have to question if he likes you or not, he's not the man for you. But I read this really interesting um, article the other day or essay by a girl called Iris on Medium, and she said that she's changed her mind about that. And the phrase "if they wanted to, they would" assumes that love is always brave, but love in real life is often full of fear, of trying and failing, and of meaning well but maybe falling short. And I think sometimes that's what causes us the most hurt is. Uh, Not that they didn't do the thing, but, like, knowing that they could have. Like,
Mm.
knowing that they thought of you and they didn't make the effort, or knowing they cared and they still left or ghosted you, and knowing that they wanted to and didn't, essentially. And I just wondered what you thought about that, because I've always been someone that says if he wanted to, he would, but actually, maybe people don't know how
Mm.
sometimes.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful point. And I do think that there is people who they, because of childhood conditioning or things like that, they stop themselves from getting into relationships
Mm,
or things like that. But I guess the reason why I still kind of stand by that is because it's not your job to then stay in or try and get this person if they're
mm,
not ready for it. The right person isn't just the right person for you, it's also a person who is ready for a commitment with you. And so it doesn't say anything about you if they're not ready to, but I also just don't recommend for people, both men and women, to have to desperately try to make somebody love them because there is, even if it's to do with their childhood trauma or things like that, it's not your job to do that for them.
yeah,
And what will typically end up happening is because they're coming from such a wounded place with their actions, then it will in turn just kind of make you lack in self-worth or bring out insecurities of yours or make you kind of perform from a more wounded place. So yeah, I do understand what she's saying and I do actually agree with her, but I still don't think that it's then worth trying to make the relationship work because both people need to be ready and willing and available for that relationship for it to work. It
yeah.
can't just be one person that really wants to make that relationship work and the other person is kind of wants to, but then isn't putting things in place to make that happen.
Mm. Yeah, I do think that makes a lot of sense. And I think maybe as women, we do play that like fixer role a little bit more.
Yeah.
And myself and friends, I'm sure, have had experiences of, oh, but I can change him. I can
Yeah.
tell him how to do this. Or
Mhm.
I think maybe there's a bit of what would you say? Like, I think if we feel like we've done that, it's like, yes, like I want him. Like in a way, it's kind of like a
Yeah.
bit of a push and pull. But actually, I think you're right that it needs to be the right person, and they also need to be ready to commit to you. And a girl on my podcast called Jenny said, if he likes you, you'll know. If he doesn't, you'll be confused. And I do think that's a
Yeah.
really good quote, because even though people have different ways of showing love, sometimes I think if they do have those feelings for you, it will be abundantly clear.
Yes. And just going back to what you said before about, wanting to fix somebody, you have to also acknowledge that that's coming from an insecure place as well, of feeling
Mm,
like I'll be enough if this person who has, attachment issues or whatever, then if they like me, then I'll be enough. Actually, I was with one of my clients. She is so stunningly beautiful. And one of the things that we discovered was that she always wants to go for the most attractive guy in the room. And what we realized is that that's actually coming from a little bit of an insecure place within her of she is so beautiful, but she doesn't necessarily like realize that sometimes within herself, or it's just a subconscious thing that she's seeking, the most attractive person so that she will then feel
yeah,
enough. She'll then feel, okay, I am beautiful enough because this really attractive guy likes me too. And again, that's coming from a very insecure place. So just looking at where you're coming from when you're trying to do these things, when you're trying to fix someone. And to be fair, it can come from a very just like loving, nurturing place, but it can also come from if especially if the person is so far the other way and it's like a challenge. That's probably coming from your own insecurities of feeling like if I manage to do this, then I'm enough, then I'm lovable, then I'm so special. So
yeah. I'm literally like reflecting on past relationships now, and like that's like a light bulb moment that makes so much sense. And it's just using that example that's so different from your client acknowledging that she's attractive, and I'm sure she's got loads of other qualities, and then wanting a partner that matches that.
yes.
It's actually, as you said, coming from a place of insecurity. And I think that does really show up in relationships, because then you're constantly looking for validation from the other person in lots of different ways, rather than your self-worth,
Yes.
and you're confident in that.
Yes, and that's why, I do think it's such an important foundation when you're dating to work on your own internal world and work on your levels of self-love and your levels of self-worth, because otherwise you will go into the dating scene desperately just trying to seek breadcrumbs from people so that you can feel lovable, so that you can feel worthy. And in those kind of situations, it's like even if that person does shower you in love, if you can't connect to love within yourself, then it will basically be like them pouring water into like a broken glass. It will never actually truly connect to you because you don't believe that about yourself. So you know that they think it about you, but to really allow it to sink in, you have to be able to connect to that within yourself. And that's a very different way of dating, because then even then, for instance, rejection, then you can just view it as just a redirection, or
Hmm.
ghosting. It says a lot more about them than it does about you. And when you know your worth, then it's not, I think there's a lot of stuff out there where it makes it seem like women that know their worth are, these like divas, but
Yeah.
it's not like that. It's that if you know your worth, then other people will too. But that's not in a sense that you have to walk around like this diva so arrogant, but it's just that if you don't know your worth, then you will accept very you know toxic behavior
Yeah.
or things like that. And so yeah,
And allow people to treat you poorly.
100%.
Whereas I think if you know your worth, and you kind of have those boundaries, uh, then hopefully you wouldn't kind of fall into those types of relationships.
Yeah.
I love that we've kind of circled back to what we first spoke about at the beginning. It's been a very nice, like, 360 conversation. But I'm going to ask you my question that I ask every guest at the end of the podcast, which is if you had to give one piece of advice to help people achieve their personal best, what would it be?
Love this question, by the way. Um, so I would say prioritize focusing on your inner world before you focus on your outer world.
Mm,
And because at the end of the day, you can achieve all your personal best in the exterior world of, uh, if you want to have X amount in your bank account or, or those sorts of things. But you will never be truly happy with any of those things if you don't work on your internal world. And so, yeah, I would say that work on your internal world, prioritize your internal world above
mm.
your external world.
I think that's such good advice. And I've had so many conversations with guests before about success and how that links to, I guess, confidence. And everyone's got a story of reaching a goal and then not really feeling any different because they kind of
Exactly.
pinned their self-worth, I guess, on
Mm-hmm.
that outer thing. Whereas what you're saying, which I really love, is like you need to kind of pour that into yourself first, and that when you then do achieve those things, it's like, yeah, I'm deserving of them, that's great.
Yes.
And you can have that pride in yourself and that love for
Mm.
yourself that I think is so, so important. So I love that, and this conversation has been so amazing. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm sure the audience will have as well.
Mm.
If they want to check out what you're doing, maybe coaching, whatever else, where should they go?
So you can go to my website, which is monicawadwa.com, or my social media. So on YouTube and Instagram, it's withlove.monica, and on TikTok, it's withlove.monicawadwa.
Amazing. And I'll link it all in the show notes below. But thank you
Mm.
so much. It's
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure to speak with you today.
Such a pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for listening.